look, I've always said one political party, one football team, one wife. That's my life. I've always been of the opinion that I'd like to see the way democracy and Thai politics evolve, where political parties are much more important than individuals. That's the only ideology that I will serve. Now, with other existing political parties, it has never aligned with the ideology that I found myself aligned with when I joined the Democrats.
I've known you for 30 years. Is there anything you wish you didn't do or change the course of your past?
The outcome in many events are something that I regret. Most notably, of course, the losses of lives in the protests. But it was so difficult, and even to this day, difficult to figure out. We certainly meant no harm to the protesters, but we were struggling with this armed element, and there were clashes.
Unfortunately, some people die. Do you wish you take that back, or is there anything you can change?
All right. Well, okay.
ที่เหลือไม่มีอะไรแล้ว
กลับได้แล้วทั้งนั้น
ขอลิ้นลั่นหน่อยเมื่อกี้มาถึงก็ขอแซวเลยว่านี่อาจารย์ผมใส่เสื้อฟ้ามานะ
ผมก็ถามแค่ว่าแล้วเกี่ยวอะไรกับผมตอนนี้ คุณก็เลยมาถามว่าทำไมผมใส่ฟ้า
อาจารย์ก็ยังเสื้อฟ้าอยู่
ก็บอกเต็มตู้เลยครับ
มันก็ต้องมีบ้างคือมันไม่ได้เป็นเหมือนเลิกรากับแฟนเก่าแล้วก็เอาแบบรูปเขาไปทิ้งเนาะ
มันก็ยังต้องเก็บผมพูดชัดตั้งแต่วันนั้นแล้วใช่ไหมครับว่าเป็นคนที่เป็นอุดมการณ์ประชาธิปัตย์จนตายไม่เปลี่ยนแปลง
ไอ้เรื่องนี้เดี๋ยวได้ไปคุยในภาษาอังกฤษแต่ขอนิดเดียวภาษาไทยนิดเดียว แปลว่าเสื้อตัวเก่าๆสีฟ้ามีเยอะครับแล้วหลังๆเนี่ย
ไม่ได้ซื้อใหม่ครับไม่ได้ซื้อใหม่รอให้ตัวเก่าหมดสภาพก่อน
ก็คือ zero waste โอเค thank you for coming to AIM Hour
thank you for having me
okay we're gonna switch to English so you now focusing on English okay right now I'm even like nervous talking to you in English.
You shouldn't be. I have no positions.
You look a lot happier though.
Well, it's natural. I've always said to fellow politicians that it's a very funny job. The more successful you are politically, the unhappier you are. And you can see that. You look at all the prime ministers once they leave office. Suddenly they become young again.
I still insist you look a lot happier now.
Good.
I can see it in your eyes. Do you still want to go back to politics?
I'm not determined one way or another. I've never said I've retired, but I have always told everybody and reminded myself that it's not necessary to get back into politics. I would only get back if I feel that I could make more contributions than I could from outside. And so it doesn't really depend on me, but it depends more on the political environment, the sentiment of people, politicians, political parties. So I cannot really say. And that's not just because I'm hedging or anything, but I think I have fairly clear criteria about getting back. And I've always said that I would never be a member of another political party. So it would happen only if the Democrats feel that I should get back.
It's only the Democrats. You still insist that? No other color or party at all?
No.
Is Democrat?
I've always said one political party, one football team, one wife. That's my life.
Some may say that you're not being adaptive.
Well, it's a choice of individuals. If they feel that they want to adapt, they could. I've always been of the opinion that I'd like to see the way democracy and Thai politics evolve, where political parties are much more important than individuals. I think that's the only way that we can get stability, continuity, and also put in a good learning process from all stakeholders so that politics becomes more systematic. I know it's difficult, and it's probably more difficult now because even in established democracies, personalities have, in many cases, somehow dominated or have actually outgrown political parties. I mean, Donald Trump's a very good example, where the Republican Party has almost ceased to exist. And for me, that's never healthy for any political system. So I feel that my decision to join the Democrat Party 30 years ago, or over 30 years ago, was on the basis of what it stood for and what I think it should stand for. And therefore, that's the only ideology that I will serve. Now, with other existing political parties, with due respect, they may have their strong points, they may have their own merits, but it has never aligned with the ideology that I found myself aligned with when I joined the Democrats. And frankly speaking, somebody like me cannot really form a political party without being seen as setting up something just to serve myself. So I've never been a fan. Again, I talked to many of my colleagues over the last few years where the game appeared to have been that, let's just form a party. With the old electoral system, you'd get some seats, you get some kind of bargaining power. That's not the way I want politics to be. So I'm not really interested in that kind of game. If I were 30 years younger, and I could maybe put together a group of people with roughly the same ideology, then I might consider setting up a party. But it's too late for me now.
That's the question I wanna ask. If you were born 20 years after, simply speaking, you are on the same age with Itim Parit, which party would you think will be in the upcoming election?
Well, put it this way, when Parit decided to leave the Democrat Party, I get why he had to do that, and I would have done the same. And I know because, we constantly talked to each other during that period, that he, was trying to carve a path out for himself to make his contributions. And he didn't immediately join the Move Forward Party. And it was clear to me that if he wanted to get back into electoral politics, he didn't have much of a choice. The Move Forward would inevitably be the closest to what I understand he believes in. Although he may not agree with all that the party stood for, but it's certainly closer to his ideals and policies than any other party. It's difficult to say, well, if I were his age, I could only say that my only other option would have been maybe to sit out another election and perhaps really focus on the issue of the Constitution. But it might not work out for him because I think he's happy with what he's doing. I see that he has been able to make a lot of contributions. So maybe he made the right decision.
Again, if you were born 20 years
later,
yeah, that was the word I was missing. If you were born 20 years later, why not Move Forward Party?
I say it's difficult for me to put myself in those shoes because while I think, and this is not something that I'm saying now, but even in the previous election, not the 2 elections ago, not the last one, if you really studied the political platform of parties, we, the Democrat at the time, were closest to the Future Forward Party. But there are some clear dividing lines, notably on the issue of, say, the monarchy, for instance. So that's why I say it's difficult, because me being me, I still feel there is still a bit of a gap, a distance, that would make me uncomfortable with joining the Move Forward Party. But if I were really truly born 20 years later, obviously I would be shaped by a different set of events. So I'm not a great fan of these hypothetical questions, because you're always assuming something in the background about the answer.
Critics said that when you enter politics, the main opposition of your party was the Chinawat family party, whatsoever the party is.
No, that's not right. When I entered politics, Kun Thaksin wasn't even in politics. I entered politics at a time of the Black May of 1992, where for so many people we had hoped that the 1991 coup was the last one for Thailand. And so almost the first decade of my political career was during a time where one of the most progressive and democratic constitution materialized. The Thaksin phenomenon came in my second decade of my career. Just to put the facts right.
Fact check the journalists.
And the problem has always been that when the Thaksin phenomenon happened, that is when things get more complicated. Because for me and for the Democrat Party itself at the time, we were always seen as a pro-democracy force. What Thaksin as a person, as a phenomenon, threw up as a challenge was somebody who is a populist, and like almost all populists are actually authoritarian in nature. So we feel that that's not democracy either. And we had to fight in a period where checks and balances that were set up by the 97 Constitution were being subtly and not so subtly dismantled. But then we got caught in the sort of perception war, where because despite being an authoritarian, he was also elected by a majority of people. That began to push the Democrats, myself included, as having a question mark over our commitment to democracy. But, I ask anybody who has been following my career through the past 2 coups, if they could ever find anything said or done by myself that actually indicate that I supported coup d'etats. I don't think they can find it. Their only argument might be that I actually led the party through a couple of boycotts of elections. And I would only point to the fact that like almost all countries that have struggled with democracy, political parties that usually boycott elections are parties that are fighting this kind of authoritarian populism, because it is one measure that can be taken against the abuse of the democratic process to lead the country to or serve undemocratic ends. But that's not often appreciated or understood. And I always drew a line. So for instance, during the protests plus the boycott of the elections, my instructions to party members were clear. We don't participate in the elections, but we mustn't obstruct elections. Okay, so obviously not all party members follow that line, and are now many of them now facing the consequences.
I've known you for 30 years, and there are so many events and decisions that you have made or done, but broadly, is there anything you wish you didn't do or change the course of your past?
That's also a difficult one, because obviously the outcome in many events are something that I regret. Most notably, of course, the losses of lives during the 2007 protests.
Is it 7 or 10?
Sorry, 2010. Sorry, yes, 2010.
Significant number. Could be different protests.
Sorry, 2010 protests. And when I say, the outcome is something I regret, but was so difficult, and even to this day, difficult to figure out how you handle situations like that when there are armed elements infused or hidden in the protests themselves. So we certainly meant no harm to the protesters, but we were struggling with this armed element, and there were clashes that took place for over a couple of months, almost 3 months, and then had to be ended. And then there was that complication of the fire at the Central World, and then what happened at the temple. Again, none of that was policy. None of that was something that we would instruct anybody to do. And I wished that despite all the fact-finding commissions, I don't think we do have the full picture of who's involved. But I never denied any responsibilities. I was taken to court and also to the Counter-Corruption Commission. So again, many of my critics, when they write comments in the social media about, hey, I just somehow had immunity. No, it was probably the only time when something like that happened, and I was clear as head of government that there would be no amnesty. That if we did anything wrong, we had to be accountable. And I was subsequently taken to court, as I said, and also under scrutiny from organizations beyond the period while I was in power. So I had no influence over the outcome of those investigations.
Well, speaking of your career as a politician, mainly not the country or situation at all, was resigning be an option at all back then to save your career in the future?
Actually, the closest I got to resignation was actually the year before, when the ASEAN meeting had to be abandoned. I thought I needed to take responsibility for that. And again, what changed was that the protests, they didn't stop, and they were causing more trouble. And they were actually claiming that this was something that they deliberately wanted to do. So it was something that said, well, in that case, I needed to remain where I was and try to put things right. Again, on the 10th of April 2010, when there were losses, I thought about it. And again, when pictures emerged about how, and if you look at the chronological events, where actually the first real strike was done by the people in black shirts that led to the losses of army officers, it was clear that this wasn't something that you could just walk away from. And I had to put things right again. Well, but as I said, always telling everybody in government, outside, that there would never ever be any attempt to whitewash or grant amnesty to anyone. We would all have to be accountable for what we did.
Well, amongst all of your other top qualities, choosing words are one of your best gift, public speaking, etc. But the question is, one of the things that the younger generation, when they perceive you, was that chosen word in the interview. Unfortunately, some people die. Do you wish you take that back, or is there anything you can change?
Well, I'm not sure whether this is somehow lost in translation. The word unfortunate there is to indicate that it was never the intention of the government to lead the situation to losses of lives. All right? If I recall correctly, that was a hard talk interview, which is probably one of the most difficult interviews that political leaders get. So it doesn't mean that nobody's responsible for it. The word is chosen to indicate that it certainly wasn't the intention or the policy of government. But people chose to interpret the word in a different way. And so, even until today, whenever there are contents about me in social media, you get the standard wording of my critics, that go back to these issues. And I get that. But in a way, sometimes it also tells me that, some people aren't quite prepared or willing to actually take me on the actual content of what is being put up, what is being said, and just go back to some of the things that have been used to attack me, like the other phrase that even some people still use is "ดีแต่พูด." I've always found that a bit curious, because I think my 30-odd year political career, it's quite hard to find other politicians who stick to their words the way I do, even when it costs them positions. So, but some people are still happy to use those. That's fine.
But looking back, do you feel like, with the quality that you have, education, your inspiration, looking back, do you think like your career hasn't been fulfilled?
If you ask whether I wanted to achieve more, of course. I don't know if there is a person anywhere that doesn't wish to achieve more. But I think I've given my best. I think I never, betrayed my ideology and philosophy. I think I retained my integrity. And for me, that's enough. Of course, I wish I could do more. Of course, I wish for much better outcomes, not about myself, but also for the country. But, none of us is perfect. And I think what matters as your own feelings is whether you've remained true to yourself and whether you've given your best.
You feel it's been unfair to you?
I don't see it like that. In a sense that I think when you're in a world of politics, people have different ideals. People have different opinions. So you can't somehow assume that your worldview and your standards and your criteria would be shared by others. And so, I never sort of sit back and think, oh, life is so unfair, or society is so unfair, or everybody's been so unfair. I understand where people are coming from.
Assume it's me if I deciding to join politics. What would you
Now?
wanna?
Or now?
Next election.
Next election.
Assuming.
Yeah.
Hypothetical.
It could be real. Are you asking for advice?
Yes. Because I ask because I think with your experience, I think you can see that there are new wave of people who would love to join politics.
Right.
But what would you tell them?
The first thing I always say is, well, you have to be prepared, not just in the sense of course, having whatever is necessary to run, but to maybe do a little test for yourself, which is number one, why do you want to run? What do you want to achieve in politics? And if your answer is only to be an MP, I would probably say, well, you should stay where you are. Because I think the first thing that I would look for and hope for in somebody running in politics is, well, what changes do they want to see? What contributions could they make to the country? The second thing is, do you have yourself prepared for what comes with politics, which is, what we've been talking about for I don't know how many minutes now. Criticism, sometimes you might feel unfair. Are you willing to, face up to so many people who think differently from you? So, these are the tests. And then, of course, then the next question would be, well, which party should I join? And then it's really up to individuals to find the parties that they think align best with their beliefs. And if you talk about the next election, I think the move forward now is the only party with clear sets of beliefs. So, whether you want to join them, you know exactly who they are. All the other parties are now caught up in a mess, in a sense that it's no longer clear, what they stand for. Because all the parties in the coalition now, the fact that they can join up, despite what they said about each other only a year ago, maybe, does raise question about, well, do they have any fundamental beliefs, or are they just about getting into power? The only other party remaining, of course, is a Democrat, not in the coalition, not move forward. But at the moment, again, nobody seems to know or seems to understand exactly now what they stand for.
Yeah, that's why my question, when I asked you which party would you want to join, I thought it might be obvious that it could be move forward.
Well, when I say they have a clear set of beliefs, the problem is I don't have that complete set of beliefs. There are differences that remain. Well, I think there are two things, obviously, and during the elections, despite not running, somehow I was invited to debate Kun Thanathorn, and I pointed out about the problem of not just perception, but the extremism that still runs through some of their platforms, which they appear to be reluctant to tone down or to soften. And sometimes it's not even in substance, but just in tone. I don't think that's healthy. I think sometimes it's even counterproductive to their objectives. And it continues to be divisive as far as society is concerned. The second thing that I'm still uncomfortable with is, I would say, traces of illiberalism, despite the fact that, they talk so much about freedom and liberty and so on. But the way they handle people who think different from them is not quite in line with liberal ideology. The thing about the liberal ideology is, the most classic quote would be that, I might not agree with what you say, but I will,
allow you to say.
Yeah, I will go to the lengths to defend your right to say it. I don't see that from the Move Forward's tone when it deals with people or groups of people and parties who think different from them. They have this tendency to vilify those who don't think the same.
I didn't mean this interview to be hard talk at all, but after like 30 minutes, I think it's all. I know it might be easy for you, but it's quite.
No, I think it's important. I mean, your job is to ask difficult questions.
Has it been difficult at all?
Not really. For me, I don't find, answering questions difficult because number one, I don't lie. And number two, I think apart from the fact that honesty is the best policy, I think when you have a clear set of beliefs, you can always answer questions. Maybe not to make everybody happy, but you can answer them rather than having to dodge, avoid, or say one thing today and say a different thing tomorrow.
What's difficult for you though, in life or anything?
No, I think it would be wrong to say that I don't find anything difficult. It's always difficult. The first real struggle when I wanted to be a politician was that I am, and certainly I was, a very shy person. And public speaking is the one thing that I had to struggle to get myself the confidence and the skills. You have to learn it.
Can I ask you to train me to be a better speaker? Everyone said that you are master in public speaking. How did you improve?
I spent a lot of time as a child listening to parliamentary debates. It was something quite unusual for somebody my age. I remember when I was, I must have been 11, 12. I would ride a bicycle and those days was a transistor radio with the parliamentary debates on. And to sort of familiarize myself with how people express themselves. And I was listening to politicians like Kun Chuan, Kun Samak, Kun Uthai, Kun Chamni, and ask myself questions about, why do I like that speech? Why don't I like, other people's speech? And then you sort of begin to articulate your own style and your own way of expressing yourself. But as I said, the basics has always been, number one is that it's easy if you speak the truth. And also, even until today, because when I go give talks and so on, people always ask whether I have a script or want to look at the notes or whatever. And I have very few. And what I've learned for myself is it's always important, first of all, to have clear in your mind the structure of what you want to communicate. So if if tomorrow you've got a speech coming up or a debate coming up on this particular topic, you've got to be clear what you want to say to people on that topic, how you would start, how you would support your arguments, how you might either preempt or answer people who would criticize your views, and how you want to summarize. And don't write it down. Make sure you can have that in your head. And then, of course, again, through experience, when you speak publicly, it's always important to look at the people who are listening. And so you begin to learn the vibes, if you like, whether they're actually enjoying this or they are now confused or they've lost you. And so you can tailor the substance of what you want to say without losing the structure. When you have a script, you can't do that, all right? So for instance, if I were to have to score or judge many of the people speaking in parliament these days, some of them have brilliant material.
Anyone in mind?
No. Well, many of them in the Move Forward Party, they have really great material. The problem is, it's on the screen because they use PowerPoints. You follow the PowerPoints, but you don't really connect with the person who is speaking. It always interests me because if you go look at many parliaments around the world, many of them don't allow you to use these because they think political speeches and political debates is about telling people what you think. And what you think should be responding to, whoever is speaking in that debate. But if we all have prepared materials, all we are doing, we are just making presentations on a particular issue.
Looking back, what would be your best performance in terms of speech?
I don't really. But I thought in most of the no confidence motions that I participated in, I thought I came across clear about where, the main points where I feel, I was hoping to persuade people that the government should no longer have the confidence of the people.
Yeah, I recall my university years, and it was Matichon Susabda that said on the headline, like Matichon Susabda back then was like basically the main political message each week.
Right.
And your photo and said, เกียรตินิยมอันดับหนึ่ง I'm not sure if you recall that.
I don't.
Yeah, and
I'm getting old.
not your.
But it must have been a long
Yes.
time that Patichon said something nice about me.
Maybe it's time for something non-politics. Nowadays, do you think to yourself that if you are prime minister now, is there anything you want to address to the country with the current state that they are in now?
I think there are some huge challenges that I just wish were more part of the main political dialogue. So just mention 2-3 things. The first is that globally, we are living through an era where there are so many sensitivities and conflicts and tensions. And what concerns me so far is that we have not really raised enough public awareness, and our leadership has not shown a great desire to address this in a more direct or head-on way. Okay, so for instance, the tension between the US and China is probably the most important influence on how economic and political developments play out in almost all countries, certainly in this region and also in Thailand. But we appear to be thinking, well, if we hide from this conflict, we're not involved. We're just a small regular guy who's not going to get involved. We think we can get away with it. We can't. And sooner or later, if we allow the relationship to deteriorate, both sides are going to come to us and say, hey, look, which side you're on? You're on. One day they will, go back to the saying, if you're not with us, you're against us. We can't get away from that. So I wish we could see a greater desire to try to handle this. And for me, the best way is to be actually proactive. I think we often underestimate ourselves as a country that can actually speak to all sides. I think to try to hide away from it, or to think that foreign policy is just about asking for people to invest in Thailand in this kind of climate, sometimes, it has to be done, but overemphasizing it, I think sometimes looks a little tone deaf, you know what I mean, in terms of how others see us. So that's the first thing. Second thing is economically, it's clear that the country has underperformed for quite some time now, which means that there are some fundamental structural problems, competitiveness, concentration of business, and all leading also to inequalities. Again, you see a lot of campaigning to address particular issues, like we'll give the elderly how many baht, we're going to give everybody 10,000 baht or whatever. But it doesn't suggest that there is a real plan as to how we address it. So for me, I think those are the most important things to address, economically and also internationally. Politically, we need to somehow reduce the divisiveness and the sort of black and white choice on every issue. You can't touch Article 112, or you have to abolish 112. Well, no, I don't think either position makes sense. I think there's a lot of middle ground that needs to be explored, but it needs dialogue. It needs engagement from both sides. The Constitution, and generally about how social media is driving a lot of polarization, how the media environment, whether you call it mainstream or alternative, I don't know which is alternative, which is mainstream these days. So I think, these are important issues that I wish political leaders today pay more attention on. So, for instance, when you talk about the economy now, we're going to spend about 10 months or a year obsessed about this 10,000 baht per person. When, I don't agree with the policy, but I can understand the rationale for people who say, well, this is going to be a stimulus or whatever. But it's certainly not going to fix the bigger problems that we've just talked about the Thai economy.
Okay, no politics for real. Can't help myself.
All right.
What is your weakness?
What is my weakness? Well, some people say, you mentioned it, that sometimes they wish I could adapt.
Stubbornness. Yeah. Maybe you can call that. I just think politics in the world could do more with stubborn in the sense of being principled, rather than looking for shortcuts, looking for quick fixes, forgetting your beliefs, or compromising your principles. I think we've had far too much of that.
And the one thing that I've always tried to remind myself that, people who do these kinds of things, they often think, well, it's only once, it's necessary today. But you look at the history, once you do it, you go down a very slippery slope very, very quickly. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody recover. So I'm always sort of reminding myself of that. But it becomes a weakness, yes. And, my opponents can read me very easily because it's clear.
I'm just gonna restrict myself not to follow up with more politics question.
You can have another attempt. I think you've had many already. It's okay.
Being a father, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. Well, one colleague once asked me, what is the biggest change in my life? My answer has always been having children. It just gives you a different perspective on life in the world, and it's the kind of responsibility that never goes away. You feel that you have to be there for them, and that you have to do your best for them, and be really committed.
How does it improve you?
How does it improve you? I don't think in terms of improving me. I think having a good family life is important. Actually, I think if we all had good family lives, we would be a much better society as well. But having a good family life, I think it's always sort of keeps you grounded about what's really important in life, which is, relationships with other people, and especially people who are close to you, people who love you, and people you love. So yeah, I think that's the importance.
I met you last time was last year. You were a lot happier compared to when I met you 5 years ago. But mainly, aside from politics, I assume it must be with the Newcastle United.
Yeah.
Is it true?
Yeah. Well, the Toon Army is happier ever since there's been a change of ownership, and it's not because of the money, but because of the way things have been handled. We always had this slogan that we don't demand a team that wins. We just want a team that tries. And then, the result is the bonus. From bottom of the league, looks like a third relegation in probably a decade, to Champions League, to being at Wembley. So we're happy. Okay, this year, I'm still happy. Before you say, has this been a bad year? But it's a new challenge. The way I see it is that the style of play needs a much deeper squad, and we don't have that because of the financial fair play rules. And so when the injuries pile up, when the fixtures pile up, we've lost some games where it just needed maybe 3-4 minutes more of stamina, and would have been successful both in cups and league. So, but on the whole, we're still happy with this, but we need to fix the problem that I've mentioned.
Yeah, but don't you want Newcastle to go the same route? Maybe like Man City, that they may breach some rules?
No, I don't.
But you smell the success along the way.
Well, for one thing, I'm not sure that it's easy to get away with things these days. Everton have already paid quite a high price and are still under another investigation. Nottingham Forest. I don't want to go that route.
Good luck for this season.
Thank you. We'll need it.
คำถามหนึ่งครับอาจารย์ถามมาผมอะไรก็ได้ภาษาอังกฤษฮะ
ไม่ถามเดียวเองคุณถามผมตั้งเยอะ เหลือกี่นาที
อาจารย์จะเอาชั่วโมงครึ่งก็ได้นะ
เท่าไหร่อาจารย์เหลือกี่นาที
ต้องการความ
10เหรอโอเคพร้อมยัง Well, you said you wanted to be the bridge. What kind of things would you tell the young to listen to the old, and the other way around?
Not because it's you being here. I always tell my journalists, like whenever they judge things, always look at their context. Always see them from where they come from, what made them in that position to make in any decision. And I'm not talking about only you. It's everything that happened, because I think we agree that social media kind of make the society polarized. It's either black and white. But at the end, my favorite series is The West Wing. And that's one quote from President Bartlett. He said that at the end, when you have like black and white answers to anything, it almost involves casualties or is in a war zone. Other than that, it's all the gray area. Make sure you understand the context of them. Don't be too quick to judge.
Right. And you think the old is better than the young at that or not?
I'm find myself more comfortable working with the young, to be honest.
Right. And what should the old listen to the young about?
Listen. I mean, that's my answer for a start. Listen to them first.
Right.
I get a lot from doing that. I get a lot from that. Just
Right.
listen to them.
Right.
Okay, I cannot. I should change or what matters to them. Because for me,
Go and tell that to all the old people in power now.
I'm using you to
and
send this
the
message.
young people as well too.
ขอบคุณครับ